My wife and I were born and raised in the same small town. I was a few years older than her, so we didn't interact until both of us were finished with college and had moved back. She had just come back after finishing school. The two of us bumped into each other in the grocery store and struck up a conversation. I knew of her because it was a small town, but I didn't know her personally. She had the same deal with me. After checking out, we talked to our cars, exchanged numbers, and went about our day. From the start, we seemed like a good match. We both wanted to live in the town we were born in and eventually raise a family there. The two of us also both worked in the medical sector, so this was another similarity we had. It was slow going at first because neither of us was sure it was going to work, but as time passed, it became clear it was turning serious. I always knew that I wanted a wife, kids, a house, and the whole 9 yards. She seemed like she did as well, so when I proposed, it wasn't that much of a surprise. The whole town seemed to be celebrating with us. Like I said, it was a small town. Both our families were well known and had a lot of friends here. I suppose that was why I was so insistent on coming back to eventually live here. It was a great place to just live and raise a family. Once we got married, the two of us decided to rent an apartment while we saved money up for a down payment on a house. Both our parents were more than willing to help us, but for now, we just wanted to see how much we could save. I might seem like I'm coming off as straightforward and practical, but I did love my wife very much. I'd never meshed with someone like I did her, and I assume she felt the same. For the first 2.5 years of marriage, things were going great. It was around this time, however, that I noticed my wife getting rather short with me. She'd snap at me about things that normally didn't bother her before, and it was a little startling. I thought she might have been dealing with some stuff at work, so I gave her a little time. After 6 months, the attitude started to change. My wife seemed happy and giddy again, though then something else started to pop up. My wife was always busy. When we did interact, things were fine, but this seemed to happen less and less. At the time, I was just glad she was no longer snapping at me, but there was this little voice in my head telling me something was off. I just want to tell you that you need to listen to it because usually it isn't wrong. A part of me wanted to ask outright if she was cheating on me, but I didn't know how that was going to go without any evidence behind me. So when my wife told me she was going to go out with friends, I showed up at that friend's house. They were surprised to see me and instantly looked guilty. It didn't take long to get them to tell me what was going on, so I went home and waited for my wife to come home to confront her about her cheating. The first thing she seemed most upset about when I confronted her was that her friend had broken her confidence. The guy she was cheating on me with was her high school boyfriend who also lived in town and was married. At the time, she was treating me terribly. She learned he was taken, which was crazy to me. My wife was married to me. I would think that would have played some factor in her decision-making, but it didn't. When she started treating me nicer, or what I perceived as nicer, she and the AP started up a relationship. I was in shock for a while, unsure of what to say or do. Eventually, I asked her why she did this. My wife gave me some crap about her high school boyfriend being her one true love. She didn't think they stood a chance of getting back together because he lived across the country. However, just before he got married, he moved back to the town with his wife and thought that was her chance. I asked what about me, and she just cried. The tears would have moved me at one point, but no longer. My only response to her was that she would get the divorce she wanted so she could be with her high school boyfriend and precious true love. We had a month-to-month lease on the apartment, so it wouldn't be that hard to get out of it. She told me I could keep the apartment if I wanted, and she'd go live with her AP. I wanted to mention that the AP was married, but I didn't care anymore. My soon-to-be ex-wife was no longer my problem, frankly. To my surprise, she did end up living with the AP. His wife had left town to go back to be with her parents, leaving his house with an empty spot just for my wife. It was almost so romantic if you didn't realize that both of them had blown up their marriages to be together. Once those two were moved in together and the divorce process started, the rumors started to fly through town. Everyone was eventually coming up to me, apologizing about what happened and telling me that they were sorry for how everything went down. I was embarrassed at first for the town to know what happened, but then I realized how my ex was being treated. She and her AP were essentially being treated like the town pariahs. No one wanted anything to do with them. What they had done was unforgivable in their eyes. It got so bad that the AP sold the house, took my ex with him, and left one night. I wasn't upset because I was glad that I would no longer have to see her around town. To think that the town itself had sent her running with her tail between her legs. Anytime my ex came back to visit family, which was a couple of times a year, mind you, the town shunned her. When she brought the AP with her, it was even worse. I eventually moved on and met another woman. She was someone who had been in my class. Like me, she was also dealing with a divorce because of her husband having an affair. It's not to say the two of us bonded over this, but it was something we could relate to about each other. Now the two of us are married and expecting our first child. We have our own house in the same small town we were born and raised in, which is exactly what I always wanted. It turns out I just wanted it with the wrong woman at first. My ex-wife, as far as I know, is still with the AP, but I have heard rumors of the two of them fighting in public anytime they visited town. It was fitting to know that the two of them hadn't been able to run off into the sunset like they initially wanted. I am just not going to think about them and will focus on the new life I am building with my second wife. OP, to hear that the actual town sent her and the AP running. It means there is some justice for what you went through. Small towns can be great but also have their bad points. However, one big thing about them is that they never forget. This is a great way for your ex-wife to learn that she will never be able to run from the huge mistake she made. At the very least, you can forgive and forget in a sense of the word. You've been able to move on with your life. It is a shame both you and your new wife had to go through such a terrible experience, but it did bring the two of you together in a way. Keep focusing on your new wife, child, and future. The two, or rather three of you, are going to build together. It's best to fully forget about your ex-wife and the AP. The town will keep them in check whenever they decide to come and visit. Now let's get into our next story for today. I, 30 male, got married to my wife, 32 female, when we were in our mid-20s. The two of us had been in similar circles, so it wasn't like the two of us didn't know about each other. It wasn't until we were out in a group setting that we got to talking. My best friend Greg was throwing a birthday party. I was one of the attendees, as was Laura, my future wife. After I was greeted by Greg, I wandered over to the snack table and grabbed a few snacks. It was there I bumped into Laura, who also had the same idea. Again, the two of us had talked before, but we never had a chance to have more than a surface-level conversation. That night at the party, we talked for a long time. I think we exclusively just spoke with one another. Sure, the two of us spoke with Greg, but once we started talking, it was like we couldn't stop. I ended up grabbing a cup of coffee with her that night. We stayed at the cafe for a while until realizing that it was pretty late. From there, the two of us began dating. It was slow going at first because we were both heavily involved in our careers as people in their 20s were. I was working as a chef while Laura was working in the legal sector. The two of us dated for about a year before we had a mutual conversation about what our future would look like. After a long talk, we decided that we were going to get married. In about 6 months, we had a very small wedding with just family and friends. Greg was my best man because I couldn't imagine having anyone else as my best man. Greg and I had been friends since childhood. Despite all our differences, the two of us were best friends. He tended to live a rather chaotic life, so I felt like I managed to ground him. Once Laura and I were married, we got an apartment and started building a life together. The first year, we were definitely in newlywed bliss. During the second year, we started to get out of that and shift into a more general marriage mindset. Things weren't perfect, but they were good. If we had issues, then the two of us worked them out. After our second anniversary, Greg ended up in a bad spot. He and his girlfriend at the time broke up, leaving him without a place to stay. Being the good friend I was, I asked Laura if Greg could stay with us. She agreed. We had an extra room that Greg could stay in while he saved up money to get a studio apartment. It shouldn't take long because he had a decent paying job in the financial sector. Never did I think that Greg moving in was a bad idea. He needed a place to stay, and I would be damned if I wasn't going to let him stay. However, what was supposed to be temporary ended up turning into a couple of months. I didn't want to say anything because it was clear Greg needed to still get his head on straight. Laura also didn't seem to mind him being here. The two of them were getting along quite well. At some point, I began to think it was a little too friendly. One time I even found them cuddling on the couch. They tried to pass it off like one of them just fell asleep on the other. I pretended to believe them, but I didn't buy it. I was a lot of things, but a fool wasn't one of them. So I decided to buy a nanny can and then put that up in the living room when they knew I wasn't going to be at home. The first chance I got, I checked the footage and was floored by what I saw. Laura and Greg were engaging in a romantic relationship right under my nose, in my own house. I couldn't believe either one of them would do it to me. Not only was Laura my wife, but Greg was someone I had known since childhood. How could both of them hurt me like that? The next day, I confronted the two of them. Just when they tried to deny it, I told them I had video footage of them kissing on the couch. The next thing they were saying was that it just happened and they weren't trying to hurt anyone, especially me. I asked if they loved each other. Ironically, their lack of an answer is what gave me the answer I needed. They had some type of feelings for each other, and if that was how it was, then so be it. Who was I to stand in the way of true love? After learning the truth, I said screw it and moved out to my parents. Then I went onto social media and blasted them over social media. The fallout started right away. My in-laws turned against Laura, and even Greg's family shamed him. Our mutual friends took sides, and most of them chose mine, which proved that they were better friends than Greg could ever be to me. Naturally, my own family took my side, so I had their support from the start. The next few months were a whirlwind. I had to look at getting a new place of my own, going through with the divorce, and just moving on. Greg and Laura stayed in the apartment for a while, but Greg was failing to pay his half of the rent. Eventually, it led to the two of them being evicted. Since the two of them had been shunned by family and friends basically, it was difficult for them to find any support. The two of them ended up getting evicted, and from there they scrambled to find a place to live. It shouldn't be surprising that the two of them ended up breaking up sometime after this. I didn't care because neither of them were very important people in my life anymore. One of the worst things about this was losing not only my wife but also my best friend. It seemed fitting that the two were also losing others in their life because of their actions. There wasn't one part of me that regretted blasting the truth of what they did all over Facebook. Let them feel a little of what I felt. I had never been a person who was big on revenge, but when it came down to it, I felt like I had to do it for the healing process. Would I do it again? Yes, I would, because it helped me take another step towards being able to move on. At this point in my life, I am dating again. My current girlfriend and I have been together for a few months. I can't say I have any idea where it is going to go, but I am hopeful that it is going to turn into something long-term. All I know is that I am going to take it slow. This is also something my girlfriend is fine with, thankfully. It helps a lot that she supports me in this. My ex-wife and ex-best friend aren't two people I think about anymore. Their lives haven't been easy since they decided to have an affair, but that is what you get. I can safely say that I am living my best life right now and will continue to do so now that I have those two toxic people out of my life. OP, this sounds like something you would see on a Jerry Springer episode. Your wife cheating with your best friends is just a huge blow to your trust, ego, and everything. It's crazy that they thought they could get away with cheating in the place where you all live together. A best friend is supposed to have your back and not sleep with your spouse. However, this doesn't mean your spouse is off the hook either. They are supposed to remain faithful to you. Cheating on you with your best friend of all people is just not right. I'm glad that you don't regret posting on social media about what they have done. They probably feel embarrassed that their bad deeds are out there for everyone to see, but the thing is, they should feel this way. If they didn't want to feel shame and embarrassment, then they never should have engaged in that behavior in the first place. When I read that you had begun to move on, I think I breathed a sigh of relief. I am glad that you have begun to move past your anger and try to see if there are other fish in the sea. Even if this current relationship doesn't work out, at least you can say that you've begun to try to see who else is out there for you.